The Galactic Concord had existed for 100,000 years. 12 ancient species had built it together, creating laws and borders that kept peace across 10,000 star systems. The elder races had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. They had watched young species climb toward the stars, burn bright for a few centuries, and then fade into history. It was the natural order of things. So when the archivists of the Concord noted that a species called humans had begun spreading beyond their home system, no one paid much attention. The reports were filed under Category 7, Emergent Civilization, a classification that meant primitive, short-lived, and ultimately forgettable. The Thesari had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. The Keldin had built their first space stations when humans were learning to make fire. What could such a young species possibly offer to races that had mastered the galaxy? Ambassador Kethvorin of the Thesari Dominion remembered the first time he met a human. It was at a trade station on the edge of Concord space, a busy place where merchants from a dozen worlds gathered to exchange goods and information. The human was a small creature, soft-skinned and fragile-looking, with strange flat teeth and eyes that seemed too expressive for a civilized being. "Ambassador," the human had said, bowing in the Thesari manner, which surprised Kethvorin greatly. "I am Marcus Chun, representative of the Earth Trade Consortium. We would be honored to establish commercial relations with your great dominion." Kethvorin had nearly laughed. Commercial relations? With these primitive newcomers? But the human's bow had been perfect, his pronunciation of the Thesari greeting flawless. Where had this creature learned such things? "You speak our language well," Kethvorin had admitted. "We believe that respect begins with understanding," Marcus Chun had replied. "We have studied your culture for many years. The poetry of your third dynasty is particularly beautiful." That conversation stayed with Kethvorin for a long time. No other young species had ever bothered to learn Thesari poetry. Most could barely manage basic trade language. But the humans seemed genuinely interested, genuinely curious about everything and everyone they encountered. Over the next few decades, humans appeared everywhere. They were not conquerors. They carried no weapons, commanded no warships. They came as traders, offering goods at fair prices. They came as doctors, adapting their medicine to work on alien bodies, and often charging nothing at all. They came as engineers, fixing broken ships and damaged stations with surprising skill. On the Keldin homeworld, a human named Sarah Wong opened a small clinic in the capital city. The Keldin were an insectoid species, their biology completely different from human physiology. But Sarah Wong spent 5 years studying their anatomy, their diseases, their traditional healing practices. When a plague swept through the outer districts, it was Sarah Wong who developed a cure. The Keldin High Council offered her citizenship in gratitude. She accepted with tears in her strange, soft eyes. On the gas mining platforms of Thesser 7, human engineers worked alongside Thesari workers, improving efficiency and safety. They learned the workers' names, remembered their family stories, celebrated their holidays. When a platform suffered a catastrophic failure, 3 human engineers died saving their Thesari colleagues. The workers built a memorial for them, the first monument to non-Thesari ever constructed on Thesari territory. The Concord's observers filed their reports. "Humans display unusual sociability," they wrote. "They appear desperate to form connections with established species, likely seeking protection due to their obvious physical weakness." The elder races read these reports and nodded wisely. It made perfect sense. Humans were small, fragile, and short-lived. Of course, they would try to make friends with more powerful civilizations. It was a survival strategy. Nothing more. Ambassador Kethvorin encountered Marcus Chun again, 20 years after their first meeting. The human had aged visibly, his hair turning gray, lines appearing on his face. Such short lives these creatures had. But his smile was warm, and he remembered every detail of their previous conversation. "Ambassador," Marcus Chun said, "the Earth Trade Consortium would like to request permission to establish a cultural exchange center on the Thesari capital world." Kethvorn considered the request. A cultural exchange center was a small thing, a building where humans could share their art and music and literature with interested Thesari. It seemed harmless enough. And truthfully, Kethvorn had developed a certain fondness for these strange, friendly creatures. "I will approve your request," he said, "though I cannot imagine many Thesari will be interested in human culture." Marcus Chun smiled. "You might be surprised, Ambassador." The Cultural Exchange Center opened 6 months later. Within a year, it had become one of the most popular destinations in the capital. Thesari came to hear human music, to see human art, to taste human food. They came to talk with the human staff, who listened with genuine interest to their stories and concerns. Young Thesari began learning human languages, reading human books, watching human entertainment. Similar centers opened on other worlds. Human restaurants appeared in alien cities. Human schools welcomed students of every species. Human hospitals treated patients that other doctors had given up on. Slowly, quietly, humans wove themselves into the fabric of galactic civilization. The elder races did not notice. They were too busy with their ancient disputes, their complex politics, their endless negotiations over borders and trade rights. Humans were a minor species, a footnote in galactic history. They posed no threat. They had no military power, no territorial ambitions, no desire for conquest. But every year, more humans arrived. Every year, more connections were formed. Every year, the web grew larger and stronger. Invisible threads linking humans to every corner of the galaxy, on a small colony world at the edge of Concord space. A human teacher named James Okonkwo taught alien children to read and write. He learned their languages, adapted his methods to their different minds, celebrated their successes as if they were his own family. When he died of old age, his funeral was attended by former students from 17 different species. They wept for him, this strange soft creature who had come from so far away to help them. The Concord's archivists updated their files. Human population in Concord space, approximately 2.3 billion. Primary occupations: trade, medicine, education, engineering. Military capability: negligible. Threat assessment: none. They were wrong, of course, but they would not understand that for a very long time. 400 years had passed since humanity first reached for the stars. Investigator Yilmarn of the Concord's Intelligence Secretariat sat in her office on the great station at the galaxy's core, staring at data that made no sense. The Elmarn was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species. She had served the Concord for 3 centuries, watching the rise and fall of empires, tracking threats that most citizens never knew existed. She was very good at her job. And right now, her job was giving her a headache. The trade dispute between the Thesari Dominion and the Keldin Collective had lasted for 800 years. It was a famous conflict, a wound that refused to heal. Diplomats had tried everything. Treaties had been written and broken. Blood had been spilled on both sides. Everyone agreed that the dispute would continue for centuries more. It had been resolved in 6 months. The Almarn read the report again. A human mediator named David Okafor had been invited to facilitate negotiations. Within weeks, he had identified the core grievances on both sides. Within months, he had proposed a solution that satisfied everyone. The Thesari and the Keldin had signed a permanent peace agreement, and David Okafor had moved on to his next assignment. This was not supposed to happen. Ilmarn had seen thousands of diplomatic efforts fail. She knew how difficult it was to bridge the gaps between species that had evolved on different worlds, with different values and different ways of thinking. Yet this human had done it easily, almost casually, as if 800 years of hatred meant nothing. She began to investigate. The more she looked, the more she found. Border conflicts that had simmered for millennia were suddenly quiet near human colony worlds. Trade routes that had been dangerous for centuries were now safe, thanks to human security consultants. Communication networks that had been unreliable were now functioning perfectly, maintained by human engineers. And everywhere, humans were making friends. Ilmarn decided to see for herself. She traveled to a human colony world called New Geneva, a small planet at the intersection of 3 major trade routes. What she found there changed her understanding of everything. New Geneva was not a human world. Oh, humans had founded it. Humans administered it. Humans made up perhaps 40% of its population. But the rest came from dozens of different species. The Zari merchants lived next to Keldin artists. Vorten philosophers debated with Kelish scientists. Children of 100 different worlds played together in the parks and streets. The Elmon had never seen anything like it. The Concord preached cooperation between species, but in practice, most worlds were dominated by a single race. Different species lived separately, traded carefully, and viewed each other with suspicion. On New Geneva, they lived together as neighbors. She spent a month on the planet, watching and learning. She saw a human doctor treating a Thesari patient, speaking to him in his own language, asking about his family, remembering details from their previous conversations. She saw a human teacher helping a young Keldin student with her mathematics, adapting his explanations to match her different way of thinking. She saw a human chef preparing food for customers of 6 different species, knowing exactly what each one could and could not eat. The humans remembered everything. They learned every language, every custom, every taboo. They celebrated every species' holidays, mourned every species' losses, rejoiced in every species' triumphs. They did not see the galaxy as a collection of competing civilizations. They saw it as a neighborhood. Ilmar met a woman named Maria Santos, an elderly human who ran a small community center in the capital city. Maria knew everyone in the district by name. She knew their children, their jobs, their hopes and fears. When someone was sick, Maria organized help. When someone was lonely, Maria found them friends. When someone needed work, Maria knew who was hiring. "Why do you do this?" Ilmarn asked her one evening. Maria looked surprised by the question. "Why wouldn't I? These are my neighbors, my friends. This is my home. But they are not your species. They are aliens." Maria laughed, a warm sound that Ilmarn found strangely comforting. "Investigator, I've lived on this world for 60 years. I've watched the Sari children grow up, marry, have children of their own. I've mourned Keldin friends who passed away. I've celebrated Vorten festivals and learned Kelish songs. These people are not aliens to me. They are family." Ilmarn attended a funeral during her stay on New Geneva. A human woman named Elizabeth Akunquo had died at the age of 92. She had been a teacher, a doctor, a community organizer, a friend to countless people across her long life. Representatives from 47 species came to say goodbye. They told stories about Elizabeth, how she had learned to speak 15 languages fluently so she could teach students in their native tongues, how she had walked through a war zone to deliver medicine to sick children when everyone else was too afraid, how she had spent her final years visiting the elderly and the lonely, bringing them food and company and hope. The Elmarn listened to these stories, and something strange happened. She began to cry. She, who'd witnessed the destruction of worlds without shedding a tear, wept for this single human woman she had never met, She understood then what the humans were doing. They were not seeking protection. They were not building alliances for political advantage. They were simply being kind, day after day, year after year, generation after generation. And that kindness was spreading, changing the galaxy in ways that no weapon or treaty ever could. Yilmarn returned to the Concord station and filed her report. "Humans do not pose a military threat," she wrote. "Their influence comes from a different source. They make connections. They build relationships. They remember us when we forget ourselves. I do not know if this is a strategy or simply their nature. I only know that the galaxy is changing, and the humans are at the center of that change." Her superiors read the report and filed it away. Yilmarn was old, they decided. Perhaps her judgment was failing. Humans were a minor species, harmless and forgettable. There was nothing to worry about. They were wrong. The warning came from the Outer Rim, from a small observation post that humanity had helped build 50 years earlier. A vast fleet had been detected, moving toward Concord space. The ships were huge, their weapons powerful, their numbers beyond counting. The Vreth hegemony had arrived. The Concord had heard rumors of the Vreth for centuries. They came from beyond known space, a conquering empire that had swallowed 100 civilizations in their march across the stars. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They simply took what they wanted and destroyed what they did not need. And now they were coming for the Concord. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Concord Assembly met in emergency session. The 12 elder races gathered in the great chamber at the galaxy's core, their representatives arguing and debating as they had done for millennia. How should they respond? Who would lead the defense? How could they coordinate their fleets? Grand Admiral Thiessen of the Concord fleet demanded a full assessment of available resources. He needed to know what ships they had, what weapons, what supplies. He needed to understand the strategic situation before he could plan a defense. The report that came back made him very quiet for a very long time. 70% of all interstellar shipping in Concord space ran on human-designed logistics networks. The software that tracked every cargo ship, every supply depot, every fuel station had been written by human programmers and maintained by human technicians. 60% of all translation software used by the Concord was human-coded. The systems that allowed the Sari to speak with Keldin, that let Vorton negotiate with Kelish, that made communication between species possible, had been built by humans. Human doctors served on the medical staffs of every major species. Human engineers maintained the Concord's own defense stations. Human teachers had educated 2 generations of officers in the fleet academies. Human diplomats had marriage ties to 17 of the 20 most powerful political families in the galaxy. Admiral Thiessen looked at these numbers and felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. How did this happen? He demanded, how did we allow a minor species to become so essential? No one had an answer. It had happened so slowly, so gradually, that no one had noticed. The humans had not conquered anything. They had simply made themselves useful, helpful, necessary. They had filled gaps that no one else wanted to fill. They had taken jobs that no one else wanted to do. And now, without anyone realizing it, the galaxy depended on them. The human ambassador was summoned to the assembly. Her name was Chen Wei-Lin, a small woman with silver hair and calm eyes. She stood before the 12 elder races without any sign of fear. "Ambassador Chen," Admiral Thiessen said, "we face an invasion. The Vreth hegemony threatens the existence of every species in the Concord. We need to know what resources humanity can contribute to the defense. How many ships can you provide?" Ambassador Chen smiled. It was not a mocking smile, not a triumphant smile. It was the smile of a teacher about to explain something obvious. "Admiral," she said, "humanity has no warships. We have no military fleet. We have never believed in solving problems through violence." "Then you are useless to us," one of the Keldin representatives snapped. "Why did we even call you here?" Ambassador Chun's smile did not waver. "Admiral Thyssen, may I ask you a question? Your navigation officers, who trained them?" The Admiral hesitated. "They were trained at the Fleet Academy on Nesser Prime." "And who designed the training curriculum at that academy?" Thyssen was silent. "Your fleet's communication systems," Ambassador Chun continued. "Who maintains them? Your supply lines, who manages them? Your medical teams, who trained them? Your ships are powerful, Admiral. But without the humans who help them function, they are just metal floating in space." The assembly chamber was very quiet. "Humanity does not have a military," Ambassador Chun said. "We have something better. We have you. All of you. Every species in this room owes debts to humanity that can never be repaid. Your children learned in our schools. Your sick were healed in our hospitals. Your disputes were settled by our mediators. We have been part of your civilizations for centuries. Your fleets are our contribution to this war. Your soldiers are our soldiers. Your victory will be our victory." Yeomarn, now ancient and respected, spoke from her seat in the observer gallery. "The ambassador speaks the truth. I investigated humanity 200 years ago. I warned the Concord then, but no one listened. Humans do not conquer through force. They conquer through kindness. And by the time you realize what they have done, it is already too late." Admiral Thyssen looked at the human ambassador with new eyes. He had thought of humans as a minor species, useful but unimportant. Now he saw the truth. Humanity had made itself the heart of galactic civilization. They were not allies of the Concord. They were the glue that held the Concord together. "What do you suggest we do?" he asked. Ambassador Chun stepped forward. "Let us help you. Let our logistics experts coordinate your supply lines. Let our communications specialists link your fleets. Let our diplomats unite your peoples against the common enemy. We cannot fight your battles for you, but we can make sure you fight together as one civilization instead of 12. The assembly voted. For the first time in 10,000 years, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would coordinate the defense of the Concord against the Vreth hegemony. As she left the chamber, Ambassador Chun passed Yeomarn's seat. The old investigator reached out and touched her hand. "I understand now," Yeomarn said. "You never wanted to conquer us." Ambassador Chun squeezed her hand gently. "We never wanted anything except to be your friends. Everything else followed from that. And if we had refused your friendship, if we had pushed you away," the ambassador's smile was sad, "then we would have kept trying. That is what friends do." The Vreth hegemony had conquered 100 civilizations. Their strategy was simple and effective. They would arrive with overwhelming force, identify the divisions between their enemies, and exploit those weaknesses. Ancient rivalries became weapons. Old hatreds became tools. Species that should have united against the common threat would instead fight each other, making the Vreth's victory easy. Supreme Commander Vrethkal studied the intelligence reports on the Galactic Concord with satisfaction. 12 species, 12 different governments, centuries of conflict and suspicion between them. The Thesari despised the Keldin. The Vorten distrusted the Kelish. The Concord was an alliance in name only, held together by treaties that everyone ignored when convenient. This would be an easy conquest. He was wrong. The first Vreth attack fleet arrived at the border expecting chaos. They found a wall. The Thesari battlecruisers flew in perfect formation with Keldin carrier swarms. Vorten destroyers coordinated with Kelish frigates. Ships from 12 different species moved as one, their actions synchronized with impossible precision. How is this possible? Vrethkal demanded. Our intelligence said they could barely communicate with each other. Supreme Commander, his aide reported, we are detecting unusual signal patterns. The enemy fleet is using communication protocols we have never seen before. Their coordination is unlike anything in our records. Behind the battle lines, human logistics experts managed the flow of supplies and reinforcements. They had spent months preparing for this moment, mapping every supply route, calculating every need, positioning resources where they would be needed most. The Concorde fleets never ran short of fuel, ammunition, or medical supplies. Everything arrived exactly when it was needed. Human communication specialists linked the different fleets together. They had written translation software that worked in real time, allowing commanders of different species to speak as easily as if they shared a native language. They had built command networks that let admirals from different worlds coordinate their strategies without misunderstanding. Human intelligence analysts had predicted the Vreth invasion routes with uncanny accuracy. They had spent centuries building relationships with informants and contacts across the galaxy. They knew things that should have been impossible to know, secrets that had been hidden for generations. And they shared this information freely with the Concorde commanders. The Vreth advance slowed. Then it stopped. Then it began to reverse. But humanity's greatest weapon was not logistics or communications or intelligence. It was something the Vreth had never encountered before. Something they had no defense against. Friendship. Human diplomats began appearing on Vreth-conquered worlds. They came alone, unarmed, carrying nothing but translation devices and medical supplies. They learned the languages of the conquered species. They listened to their stories. They offered help without asking for anything in return. The Vreth hegemony was not a unified empire. It was a collection of enslaved species, held together by fear and force. The Vreth had conquered dozens of civilizations and forced them to serve. These subject races manned Vreth ships, built Vreth weapons, grew Vreth food. They had no choice. Resistance meant death. The humans offered them something different, hope, on a conquered world called Vesha 7. A human woman named Amara Asay made contact with the underground resistance. She brought medicine for their sick, food for their hungry, weapons for their fighters. But more than that, she brought a message. You are not alone, she told them. The galaxy is fighting back. And when the Vreth fall, you will be free. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Human agents made contact with resistance movements, provided support, coordinated actions. They did not ask the conquered peoples to fight for the Concorde. They asked them to fight for themselves, for their own freedom, for the future of their children. The Vreth found their supply lines under attack. Their communication networks were sabotaged. Their commanders received false orders. Their soldiers began to desert. The empire that had seemed so strong, so unstoppable, was rotting from within. Supreme Commander Vrethkal raged against the chaos. How was this happening? His intelligence officers could not explain it. His military advisors had no answers. His empire was crumbling, and he did not understand why. On his own flagship, his personal medical officer requested a private meeting. Her name was Yalia, a member of a species the Vreth had conquered 3 generations ago. She had served Vrethkal faithfully for 20 years. He trusted her completely. Supreme Commander, she said, I have a message for you. From whom? From the humans? Vrethkal stared at her. You have been in contact with the enemy? They are not my enemies, Supreme Commander. They never were. Yalia's voice was calm, steady, unafraid. The humans have taught me something that you never could. They taught me that I matter, that my people matter. that we deserve to be free. I could kill you for this treason. Yes, but you will not. Yalia smiled. The humans have a saying. You can kill an enemy, but you cannot kill an idea. The idea of freedom is spreading through your empire, Supreme Commander. Your soldiers are deserting. Your slaves are rebelling. Your commanders are losing faith. You cannot stop it. No one can. What is this message from the humans? They want to know if you would like to negotiate. The war ended 3 months later. The Vreth hegemony did not fall to military defeat. It simply fell apart. Species that had been enslaved for generations rose up and claimed their freedom. Vreth commanders surrendered rather than continue a fight they could not win. The great fleet that had threatened to destroy the Concord scattered and fled. And at the center of it all, human diplomats worked to build a peace that would last. They negotiated treaties, mediated disputes, helped former enemies become friends. They did not demand revenge or punishment. They simply asked everyone to move forward together. Supreme Commander Vrethkal was allowed to live, to return to his homeworld in disgrace. Before he left, he asked to speak with a human representative. A young man named James arrived, alone and unarmed. I do not understand, Vrethkal said. How did you defeat us? You have no military, no weapons, no power. James smiled gently. We have the most powerful weapon in the universe, Supreme Commander. We have each other. All of us. Every species we have ever met. Every friend we have ever made. You tried to divide the galaxy. We spent centuries bringing it together. But why? What do you gain from this? Friends, James said simply. Neighbors. Family. What else is there worth gaining? Vrethkal had no answer to that. 50 years had passed since the Vreth War. The galaxy had entered an age of peace and prosperity, unlike anything in recorded history. Old enemies worked together as partners. Ancient borders meant nothing. Species that had never communicated now shared knowledge, art, and friendship freely. The Concord's historians convened a special session to document what had happened. They wanted to understand how the galaxy had changed so completely, and what role humanity had played in that change. The great chamber at the galaxy's core was filled with scholars from every species, all seeking the same answer. How had humanity died? Yeomarn was very old now, the eldest living member of her species. She moved slowly, her body failing even as her mind remained sharp. But when she rose to speak, the chamber fell silent. Everyone knew her story. Everyone wanted to hear what she had to say. I have studied humanity for 300 years, she began. I have lived among them, learned their languages, attended their ceremonies. I have watched them from their first fumbling steps into the galaxy to their current position at the heart of everything we do. And I still do not fully understand them. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When humans first arrived, we dismissed them. They were small, weak, short-lived. They had no great technology, no military power, no ancient wisdom. We thought they would fade away like so many young species before them. We were so certain of our superiority that we never bothered to look closely at what they were actually doing. The historians leaned forward, recording every word. What were they doing? They were learning our languages. Not just the trade languages that everyone uses, but our native tongues, our poetry, our songs. They were studying our histories, our cultures, our beliefs. They were asking questions about our families, our hopes, our fears. And they remembered everything. Yeoman smiled, a sad and wondering smile. I once asked a human why they did this. Why spend so much effort learning about species so different from themselves? She told me something I have never forgotten. She said, every person is a universe. Every species is a galaxy of universes. How could we not want to explore them all? The chamber was very quiet. Humans did not conquer the galaxy through force. They conquered it through curiosity. They genuinely wanted to know us, all of us, as individuals and as peoples. And when someone truly wants to know you, when someone listens to your stories and remembers your name and celebrates your victories and mourns your losses, something happens. You begin to trust them. You begin to care about them. You begin to love them. Eomarn sat down slowly. Another historian rose to present data and analysis. But the chamber's attention remained on the old investigator's words. After the formal session ended, Eomarn walked through the station's gardens. Human gardeners had designed these gardens, creating spaces where representatives from different species could feel at home. The Zari flowers grew beside Keldin fungi. Vorton trees provided shade for Kellish meditation pools. It was a small thing, but it showed humanity's gift for bringing others together. A young Dasari child approached her, accompanied by two friends, a Keldin and a human. The three children were clearly comfortable together, laughing and playing as if they had known each other all their lives. "Honored elder," the Dasari child said politely. "Our teacher said you know stories about the old times, when the species did not talk to each other. Is that true?" Eomarn looked at the three children. They could not imagine a galaxy where species lived apart, where ancient hatreds divided peoples, where fear and suspicion ruled. For them, this unity was simply the way things were. "Yes," she said, "it is true. Before the humans came, we were very different." The human child, a small girl with dark skin and bright eyes, looked curious. "But why? Why didn't everyone just be friends?" Eomarn considered the question carefully. How could she explain millennia of conflict to a child who had only known peace? "We were afraid," she said finally. "We did not understand each other, and what we do not understand, we fear. What we fear, we hate. What we hate, we fight. It is a cycle that is very difficult to break." "But the humans broke it," the Keldin child said. "Our teacher told us. They taught everyone to be friends." "Yes and no," Eomarn said. "Humans did not teach us to be friends. They showed us how. They were friends first, to everyone they met, without waiting to see if others would be friends to them. They gave without expecting to receive. They trusted without demanding trust in return. And slowly, very slowly, we learned to do the same." The children nodded seriously, as if this explanation made perfect sense. Perhaps to them, it did. The Elmon watched them run off to play, the three species moving together as naturally as if they were one family. And perhaps they were. Perhaps that was what humanity had really done. They had not created an alliance or an empire. They had created a family. Later that day, Eomarn addressed the assembly one final time. Her voice was weak, but her words carried across the great chamber. "We spent millennia building walls between our peoples," she said. "We thought walls made us safe. We thought separation made us strong. We were wrong. Walls can be torn down. Separation can be ended. But the connections humanity built, the friendships they made, the love they shared, those things become part of who we are. We cannot remove them without removing ourselves." She paused, looking around at the representatives of species that had once been enemies, now working together as partners. By the moment we understood what humanity had done, it was already too late. They had woven themselves into every part of our civilization. They had made themselves essential. They had made themselves family. And we never noticed because they did it so gently, so kindly, so lovingly that it never felt like conquest. It felt like coming home. The assembly was silent. "The humans did not dominate the galaxy," Eomarn said. "They embraced it. And the galaxy, in the end, embraced them back. That is not domination. That is something far more powerful. That is love, Outside the station, in the gardens that humans had designed, a new generation of children played together. They did not know the old hatreds. They did not remember the ancient fears. They only knew that they were friends, that the galaxy was their home, and that somewhere out there, among the stars, there were more friends waiting to be met. This was humanity's gift to the universe. Not conquest, not domination, simply the radical, revolutionary, unstoppable power of treating everyone they met as a friend. And by the time the galaxy understood what that meant, it had already changed everything.